Hey guys, welcome to the Line Before podcast. I am Tracy. That over there is Seth. What's going on, Seth?
I'm good, bro. How are you, man? Where can
I'm
people catch us at?
I'm doing pretty good. It is early in the morning. Neither one of us could sleep, but I've got a very interesting story about skinwalkers, which is Abby from Two Girls One Cut. I was talking with her earlier, and we were talking about skinwalkers, and I come across this story. It's kind of long, but it is very interesting and it's creepy on top of that. But if you guys like this, be sure to look us up on Nighthawk Radio Facebook page. You can find us on Seth's Daily Podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and Seth the Soil Guy on TikTok. We just put out a little 1 minute mini cast on TikTok, so you guys can check us out on those things. But I don't know if a Skinwalker is pretty much Navajo folklore. Some the Navajo believe that to be true. There's many stories. They actually got that show. I think it's on the History Channel. I've never watched it, but I know that it's with Skinwalker Ranch. And if you look at the original owners back in the 90s who bought this thing, they talk about a huge wolf that they had shot several times because it was, they raised cattle out there and, wolves do to cattle. But apparently this wolf was about 6 foot tall. I mean, on its hind legs. And they had shot at it several times and it was just like it never phased it. But that's part of the Skinwalker Ranch, which kind of coincides with this story I'm getting ready to read to you. It is a very long story, but it seems like it takes a minute for it to get going. But once it gets going, hang on because it is a heck of a story. So here we go. If you're ready, you didn't tell me my camera wasn't ready, Seth. All right, so here we go. It says, come on, there. It says, growing up in Arizona, and now pause. There we go. Growing up in Arizona, myths and legends are part of life. Native traditions, mystic places, vortexes, UFO abductions, and dozens of other stories of unknown that I've always found fascinating. I grew up spending a lot of time wandering around the desert in the mountains, hunting, camping, etc. So I felt very home in the wilderness. One late spring day, on one of my many hiking adventures, I wandered off the trail and after several hours came upon a small group of old mud adobe houses. A few people heard me coming and came out of the houses to investigate, and after apparently making the collective decision that I was not a threat, one of the elders, dressed in old style tradition native clothing and headdress, came over to greet me. The man spoke slowly and told me that I had wandered into the Navajo reservation and asked me if I was lost or if I needed help. When I told him no, I was lost, but intentionally, he chuckled and invited me in to eat with his family. The next several hours were one of the greatest experiences of my life. The whole thing was like being thrown back in time. While we ate and talked, others from surrounding houses began to come over and join us as I got the feeling that they didn't get many outside visitors. We shared stories for hours about life, family, history, the area, and time that's spent in the wild. And the longer we talked, the more they opened up, and the more interesting the elders got. Throughout the time, there was one man who never spoke. He just sat outside the circle, listening and watching me. At one point, I told him I did what I called my walkabouts every year around September, where I would go out by myself into the wilderness for around 2 weeks at a time, and this got his attention of the silent one. When I finished, he came over to the circle of the fire and sat directly on the ground in front of me and asked me to join him on the ground. He told me that years ago he used to do the same thing, and he went on to tell me about a canyon he went to. He described it as a dangerous but magic place. and that I would see the world differently if I came back. If must be for dramatic effect. When he finished, he invited me over to his home. The house was small, and though an open door in the back room, I could see it was filled with various animal pelts, coyotes and wolves mostly. He walked over and closed the door, then picked up and handed me an old map and some written directions that seemed like he had been holding on to them for a long time, and just walked away back into the room and closed the door behind him. It was late, and one of the families invited me to stay the night, which I gladly did. The next morning, as I prepared to leave, one of the old women came over to me and had something in her hands and handed me a talisman and simply said, "Dip your bullets in the white ash of the hottest part of the fire." And then she just walked away. September came, and as I packed up for my walkabout, I saw the talisman in the drawer, and something felt right about taking it with me. After a beautiful drive, I was very happy to find the Forest Service road marked on the old map. The entrance to the area was remote and overgrown, and tough to get through even in my Jeep, and it took me much longer to get to than unexpected. So I decided to make camp and start hiking in the morning. A few hours on the trail that looked like it had been forgotten, I came to a stream in the entrance to the secret valley. It was a narrow crack in the tall cliffs, about 4 feet of water running gently through, but too narrow for a kayak or a canoe. I hoisted my gear over my head and began to walk sideways through chest deep water. The crack in the cliffs seemed to go on forever, but after almost 2 hours, I came to the place where it opened up into a small lake, an incredible valley surrounded by tall rocks. This may have been the most remote place I've ever been in since that there was no sign of people had ever been there. No trash, no bullet casings, not even evidence of campfires. My first night there was the quietest night I've ever spent in the wild. No birds, no crickets, but it didn't feel like I was alone there. In the morning, after breakfast, I headed out on my first exploratory hike to explore my new home for the next couple of weeks. After being stalked by a mountain lion on a hike about 10 years ago, I make it a point to bring a pistol with me when I'm out in the wilderness hiking. After some looking around, I found a narrow path that apparently to a let's see, I found a narrow path that apparently to be a game trail that led up to the side of the cliffs and towards what looked like caves from the canyon floor. I made my way up to them and came up on an entrance that was much larger than it appeared from below. I made some noise to alert any animals that was in and made my way inside. The cave was expansive, single chambered, that went back a couple hundred feet. As I walked, I inspected it as much as I could to see with my light, but there was no tracks of any kind in the dirt besides mine. I decided I was alone in there and pushed towards the rear of the cave. As I came around the bend and approached the end, my headlight panned across a large pile of bones, some animal, some human, and a very old-looking small candle sitting on a natural stone shelf. This was the first thing that had scared me in a long time that I can remember. But focusing my wits, I remembered that there were no tracks in the cave and figured it was from a long time ago. I was still a little uneasy as I exited the cave and was ready to get back to camp. As I came out into the light about 75 feet away, there was the largest wolf I have ever seen that looked like it was coming down standing on its hind legs. It dropped down on all fours on a rock and just began staring at me, not growling, not baring its teeth, just staring. I pulled my 45 and fired 2 shots to the side of it to scare it away, but it didn't even flinch. Not only have I ever seen a wolf in this part of Arizona, but I have never seen a wild animal that didn't at least flinch at the sound of a gunshot. We both stood there staring at each other for a moment. I turned and set my backpack down to grab my binoculars to get a little closer look, but when I turned back, the wolf was gone. I made my way cautiously down the path back towards camp. I have encountered wolves before, and usually it's not the one wolf that you can see you worry about, it's the ones you can't see. I was extra cautious for the return trip back to camp. I made sure my gun was fully loaded and got my recurve bow strung just in case the wolves came back. I've seen plenty of predatory animals on my adventures. It's part of being in the wilderness. So I wasn't too worried, just prepared myself for the best I could and went over to the lake to go fishing. Within about 20 minutes, I caught two of the biggest brown trout I've ever caught, so I decided to stop fishing for the day and take a swim. Back at camp, I made a fire, cleaned my trout, made dinner. While the sun went down, I was as soon as the sun went down, all of the life in the canyon seemed to go silent. As I put out my fire and prepared for bed, I noticed that there was a small flicker of light coming from the area where the cave I had explored earlier up the side of the cliff, which didn't make sense. It was a moonless night and the stars didn't reflect in that way. I couldn't have been, or it couldn't have been the candle I had seen. It was too old and would have burned so bright, or wouldn't have burned so bright. I decided to keep my gun close and try to get some sleep. I would investigate the cave the next day. When I woke up at sunrise, there was a haze along the ground throughout the whole canyon floor. But as the sun rose, it disappeared quickly, and the area came back to life. I made my breakfast, gathered my gun and my bow, and headed back up towards the cave. When I reached the entrance, I saw there were still no tracks besides mine around the entrance and decided to push up the hill further. Just a little further up, I came up on an entrance to another cave, much smaller than the first. There was a small flat landing with a large, heavily twisted juniper tree that had absolutely surprised, or had, to my absolute surprise, had many small objects hanging from a thin, old-looking rope tied to the branches. There were bones, but there were also old things definitely made by humans that looked like they were old Native American artifacts. Thinking I may have found the spot where the old man I met on the reservation had stayed when he was there decades ago. I went into the cave. This cave was much different than the first one. Just a few feet in, I noticed the walls were covered in what looked like ceremonial cave paintings. As I pushed back farther, the cave got dramatically colder, much colder than it should have been, and the walls were completely covered with paintings the entire way. When I reached the back of the cave, I was not prepared for what I saw. There was what looked like an old altar made of wood and bones. As I looked around, as I saw that little before the back of the cave, there was another shaft in a ceiling that went up, and a large ledge about 25 feet up sat a small figure of what appeared to be a woman. She was small and pale, with her face painted white, and wearing something like a crown of woven branches with two small antlers in front. I stopped and stared a few minutes at the figure and did not move, so I assumed that it was a mummified remains of maybe long ago. Not wanting to disturb a burial site, I turned to walk back out of the cave, but I began to walk. I heard what sounded like faint voice, unknown ancient language. I instinctively looked back up towards the figure, but it was gone. I was immediately terrified. I ran out of the cave as fast as I could, but my headlight flickered and died. I made my way along by feeling the sides of the wall all the way out, and it felt like there was something right behind me. When I saw the first light from the cave entrance, I began to sprint towards it. Just as I made it out, I looked back and there was nothing, so I slowed down. But I could still hear the faint voice, and the volume never changed. When I got outside, all of the bones and artifacts hanging from the tree were gone. I ran down the path as fast as I could, headed back to my campsite by the lake. Just as I reached the floor of the canyon, I noticed the large wolf at the tree line to my left, but this time it was standing upright on its hind legs. I stopped running, hoping to not initiate its predatory response to chase me, and again it stood there staring at me. I reached my campsite safely and immediately began packing up. It was too late in the day to make it out before dark, and I did not want to make this hike out at night with all that was going on. I moved my tent so it would be back up against the canyon wall by the crack in the cliffside so I didn't have to worry about anything sneaking up behind me. I built a fire much larger and knew I wasn't going to get any sleep that night. Just as the sun was going down, I began to hear noises coming from the trees, and I felt like I was being hunted. Finally, in the last light of day, I saw the wolf slowly walking around by where the path led out to the trees, and it began to slowly walk towards me. This time I drew my gun and fired towards the creature and intended to hit it. And while I saw a couple of rounds hit the dirt, several bullets hit it. Several rounds from a 45 will at least slow down anything I've ever encountered, but this giant wolf kept walking towards me like nothing had happened. I continued to fire until inevitably the click of an empty magazine. I reached down and fumbled around my backpack looking for another magazine to reload. And as I lifted it, the talisman of the old woman gave me fell out onto the ground. I picked it up and put it around my neck and immediately remembered what she told me. Dip your bullets in the white ash. I looked around, but I didn't see my backup magazine. So I grabbed my bow, pulled an arrow that was tipped with a hunting broadhead, and dipped it into the white ashes, drew and fired. I hit the creature just in front of its right hip, and it let out a noise somewhere between a growl and a person screaming that made my blood curdle. I can hear that noise in my head to this day. Immediately, it immediately turned and ran back towards the trees, and in the flicker of the firelight I saw the small woman with the antlered crown standing there waiting for it. They both retreated into the trees for the rest of the night. I could hear the same faint voice I heard in the cave, and I spent the night outside my tent as awake as I have ever been, but no longer afraid, and at dawn finished packing up so I could get out of the canyon. The next spring I went back to the small group houses on the Navajo reservation I had found the year before. I was wearing the talisman around my neck, and the first person to greet me was the woman who had given it to me, and she ran up to me and gave me a big hug and said, "You heard me," was all she said. I asked the group about the man who had given me the map, as I was almost desperate to talk to him about the experience I had so I could compare it to his own. They told me that the man disappeared shortly after I visited the first time and had not been back since. Strangely, when I tried to tell them what happened to me, no one would let me tell the story. The oldest man there, who sat in the corner, kept mumbling, "Ye Nala Dushi," which I have no idea what that means. We once again sat and shared other stories of life and a meal. Before I left the next morning, I found the old woman who had given me the talisman and offered it back to her. She smiled and told me I had a good heart, then just closed my hands around it, telling me to keep it, to watch over my next walkabout. I went back to the small village on the reservation several times over the next 10 years or so until I moved to Oregon, but they never let me tell them what happened. I never went back to that canyon. While curiosity sometimes get the best of me, I don't think I ever will. So, and it's so strange that I come across this story, and Abby and I were talking about this, and it was talking about the huge wolf, and that stands out to me so much.
What's really
Just
weird about that is, man, about the old guys going missing. Makes that
well,
even weird.
I mean, this is uh, this is an incredible story, dude, and you know, I'm actually looking up to see what this Yinala Dushi means.
He said, "I don't know what that means." I
No,
couldn't help but laugh.
I have no idea. It means um, it goes on all fours. Wow. It goes on all fours. So is that the reference to the wolf, you think?
I don't know, man. That's creepy.
That is so creepy, man.
And the fact that we was talking about the Pharaoh people last week, and this story is kind of connected to the Pharaoh people, but it's kind of not too in the same
Well, I mean, it's got a
sentence.
little bit of everything. It's got some folklore. It's got some a ghost. It's got voices. It's got and you know that's another thing that you know a lot of skinwalker stories have is the antlers on the head, um, which you know as it was clearly in this story. But you know to see what that actually, what the translation of that to English, it goes on all fours. That's just, gosh, that's wild, dude.
That's creepy. And
That
speaking of next
is,
week, we'll be doing a Pharaoh people part two. That'll be fun.
yeah, yeah. And I'm going to try to do some research if I got some time to kind of see where that fits into the David Pilates 411 missing thing, you know, because that was mentioned in that. So, but I mean, I've always heard about skinwalkers and this and that, but I've never really got into it until tonight. And it's so, and like I said, it's just so weird that Abby and I was talking about this earlier, and then I come across this story right here, and it's got the wolf in it, it's got the antlers, it's got, and it's all the same. And so, yeah, man, that's just fascinating and creepy all at the same time. Again, for somebody who's been in the woods all their life, now, I mean, I got to quit reading these stories, or I'm going to quit hunting. Period. You know, because I mean, this dude fired a shot at it and hit this huge wolf with a 45, and there's not much in this world that a 45 won't stop.
So
But
is it a dog man?
to dip your bullets in the white ash,
Uh,
and on top of that, a lot of the the reports of these Wendigos or skinwalkers or whatever you want to call them, they can mimic voices.
hmm,
There's
that's
several reports of, you know, getting a knock on your door, and you know, just instinctively, a lot of people say, "Who is it?" And they'll, you know, say it's your mom, and it'll sound like your mom, but your
that's
mom's been
crazy.
dead for like 10 years,
Yeah, that's
you
creepy,
know,
bro.
or it'll mimic your kid or your wife or your husband or whatever. And um, yeah, so creepy stuff, man. That's really cool.
So are you
That is
thinking
really
that the
cool.
wolves is connected to maybe dog man or?
Well, I think it goes to shapeshifters. You know, this Wendigo or Skinwalker apparently can shapeshift into anything it wants to, animal, human, whatever. So I think it's more on the lines of being a shapeshifter versus a dogman.
Maybe that's what the dog mans are.
It could very well be. I mean, there's a lot of Native American stuff up. You know, the first dogman report was really up in Wisconsin, and there's a lot of Native American folklore up in Wisconsin. So, and you know, on the Dogman of Bray Road. So, yeah, I mean, it's in Wisconsin. So, it could very well be a shapeshifter up there that's causing all that up there. So, but yeah, man, whew, that's a great story.
It is, man. It is.
That is a great story. So, but there you have it. There's the next line before podcast at 4 in the morning.
Oh man.
So
Yeah.
it was so funny. Seth and I were supposed to do this about 11 o'clock, and I fell asleep, and he fell asleep. He sent me a message right as I fell asleep. When I woke up and found it, I was like, dude, I sent him back a message. He said, man, I just woke up. It was like what 2:30, something like that, and I was like,
Yeah.
dude, I fell asleep. I just woke up. And he said, let's do a podcast. I said, all right. Let's do a podcast. So, poor Seth has to work tomorrow, but I'll be up the rest of the day. So, you better get
Yeah,
some
man.
sleep, bro.
Hey, man, we got some interesting podcasts upcoming this week, though. We got the two girls, one cut, CUT.
Yes, and they told me today who they were doing, the next serial killer, but I was sworn to secrecy that I can't tell.
Is it
So
connected to Jeffrey Dahmer?
it is not.
Okay.
It involves some human
Hmm.
hunting and a cold area.
Hmm.
That's all I can say. Let's say the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know. Somebody out there will know what it means, though. But I don't know what that means. And we got a Bigfoot researcher coming on. I look forward to interviewing him. Then we got Keith Age, guy that literally opened the doors to Waverly Hills. Got him coming on Thursday. And Awakening Radio will be out here soon too.
Couple of weeks. We're getting it together. Be a couple more weeks. It'll be ready to go.
That's gonna be a fun episode, man.
Yeah, yeah. I'm super excited to get that going again. We're gonna have some past guests on. It'll be like a big reunion. We're gonna have a couple of people on that we were on the same radio station back in 2013, 14, 15. Going to kind of reminisce a little bit about some things that we talked about, some things that we saw, some things that we did. I mean, it's just going to be a good time.
Yes, sir. And the station will be up here soon.
Couple of weeks, hopefully. Everybody keep your fingers crossed. Couple of weeks.
Everybody have a good night and God bless.
Yes, sir.